Chapter 1. A second chance, a different choice. The cold was the last thing he felt. A deep, marrow-numbing cold that had little to do with the damp stone of the prison cell and everything to do with the void inside him. Su-chan lay on the filthy straw, his breath a faint mist in the dark. The poison, a graceful, painless thing called Silent Winter's Kiss, was a final courtesy from his half-brother. A noble's death for a disgraced noble. Ironic. He didn't fight it. The betrayal was complete. His father's averted eyes, his stepmother's satisfied smirk, and Su Liang's tearful, false testimony to the imperial magistrate, all had carved him out of the family ledger more effectively than any blade. He, the first son, the rightful heir to the Su family's culinary empire and merchant fortune, was a traitor. Forged documents, embezzled funds, a plot against the crown. A neat, elegant frame. As the darkness at the edges of his vision swallowed the last sliver of flickering torchlight from the corridor, Su-chen's final thought was not of vengeance, but of profound weariness. So much struggle. For what? He woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright. Not on straw, but on silk. Soft. Morning sunlight filtered through the lattice window of a room that was both familiar and a relic of a distant past. The polished rosewood desk, the shelf of untouched culinary theory scrolls, the faint scent of sandalwood and ink. This was his old bedchamber in the Su family's west wing. From the quality of light, it was just passed on. His hands flew to his chest. No pain, no creeping chill. They were young hands, unscarred by the kitchen burns he'd earned later, unmarked by prison filth. He stumbled to the ornate mirror. The face that stared back was his, but younger. 20, perhaps. Eyes clear of the haunting shadows of a 5-year imprisonment. Hair neatly tied, not a matted, filthy nest. The fine, blue-gray robes of a Su son. A dream? A cruel, detailed dream? He pinched the skin of his arm until it bruised. The pain was sharp, immediate. The world remained solid. Then, the memory surfaced, crisp and clear as a bell. Today is the day of ancestral accounting. In 7 days, the family council would meet to officially name the primary heir and allocate control of the businesses. In his first life, he had spent this week frantically preparing, perfecting a new spirit-infused banquet menu to showcase his worth, blind to the knives being sharpened in the shadows. A hysterical laugh bubbled in his throat. He clamped a hand over his mouth. Reborn. He was reborn. The all-consuming ambition, the desperate need for validation from a father who saw him only as a tool, the bitter rivalry with a half-brother he'd once tried to love, it all rose up like bile. And then, it drained away, leaving behind a cavernous, quiet emptiness. He didn't want it. Not the title, not the fortune, not the constant, glittering war of succession. The very thought of sitting through another family meal, another council meeting, made his skin crawl. His eyes fell on the small, lacquered box on his desk. His personal seal, a monthly allowance of spirit coins, and a few trinkets from his late mother. That was all he needed. Moving with a calm purpose he hadn't felt in either life, Su-chan packed a single, sturdy travel bag. He changed into simple, durable linen trousers and a tunic, leaving the silken robes in a heap on the bed. From the box, he took the spirit coins and his mother's jade hairpin, the only thing of hers he owned. He left the seal, the symbol of his identity as Su-chan, first son. At his writing desk, he dipped a brush in ink and paused. What had one right to the people who had condemned him to death? Rage? Accusations? Pleas? He wrote 5 characters, stark and simple, on the pristine paper. I renounce all claim. He did not sign it. They would know. Slinging his bag over his shoulder, he walked out of his chamber, down the silent, opulent halls. A few early rising servants scurried past, bowing automatically, their eyes widening slightly at his attire. He offered no explanation. At the main gate, the guard on duty blinked. "Young Master Su? You are out early." "I'm taking a walk," Su-chan said, his voice even. "Do not wait for me." He stepped through the towering gateway adorned with the Su family crest, a phoenix clutching a steaming wok, and did not look back. The city of Ethel was just waking up. The air was fresh, smelling of baked bread, damp stone, and the distant, green scent of the surrounding hills. The market in the artisans' quarter was beginning to stir. Here, the press of bodies and the cacophony of hawkers were honest, devoid of the whispered intrigues of the noble districts. Suchan used a few small coins to buy supplies: a portable cooking brazier, a good quality iron pot, a knife, a wooden bowl and spoon, and a selection of humble ingredients: a plump chicken, fresh ginger, scallions, a handful of dried shiitake mushrooms, a sack of rice. The weight of them in his bag was more comforting than any ledger or deed. He found a quiet spot by a public well, paid a coin to use it, and began to prepare. He plucked and cleaned the chicken with efficient, practiced motions. He sliced the ginger, smashed the scallions. He built a small fire with purchased charcoal and set the pot to boil. This was his secret, his curse, and his salvation in his first life: spirit cooking. It wasn't just technique. It was the ability to channel his own latent spiritual energy, qi, into the food he prepared, to infuse intent, emotion, and healing power into every slice, every stir. The Su family had seen it only as a means to create extravagant, power-boosting banquets for the elite, a tool for social climbing. As the broth began to simmer, Su Chun closed his eyes. He let go of the residual anger, the fear, the betrayal. He focused on a single, clean desire: nourishment, wholeness, peace. He poured that intent into the pot, his chi flowing from his fingertips like a gentle, warm steam, mingling with the rising vapors. For hours, he tended the fire, skimming impurities, maintaining a gentle, rolling simmer. The broth transformed from cloudy to a clear, radiant gold. The aroma that rose was not overpowering, but profoundly inviting, a scent that spoke of home, care, and deep restoration. By midday, he had a small thermos of perfect broth and a container of soft, fluffy rice. He ate slowly, sitting on the well's edge. The first spoonful spread through him like liquid sunlight. The fatigue of a traumatic rebirth, the tension in his shoulders, it all melted away. This was why he cooked, not for applause, but for this silent, fundamental healing. He learned his first piece of news from a gossipy spice merchant. "Heard from my cousin who serves at the Sioux mansion," the man said, weighing out star anise. "Big drama this morning. The first son, can you believe it? Left a note and ran off. Just vanished. The master is in a fury. The second son, Su Liang, is walking around like the cock of the walk." Su Chen paid for his spices, his face a placid mask. The face slapping had begun, but it was of the quietest, most satisfying kind. The simple, irrevocable act of removal. He had denied them the drama of his struggle, the satisfaction of his defeat. He had simply walked away. His destination was clear. He had seen the recruitment notice nailed to a public board yesterday, or a lifetime ago. It was for a personal chef at the Marshal's manor. The pay was modest, but it included room and board. More importantly, it was a fortress unto itself, loyal to the military, not the fickle nobility. It was the one place in Ethel where the Su family's influence would mean nothing. As the afternoon sun began to wane, Su Chun stood before the northern district. The architecture changed here: broader streets, heavier stone, a sense of imposing functionality rather than ornate display. And there, at the end of the main thoroughfare, was the Marshal's manor. It was not a palace. It was a citadel. High, unadorned walls of dark gray stone. A massive, iron-reinforced gate guarded by two soldiers in severe, black and silver uniforms. Their eyes were sharp, scanning the street with the vigilance of frontline scouts. The air around the manor hummed with subdued power and discipline. Taking a final, steadying breath, Su Chen approached. The guards' hands drifted toward the hilts of their swords. "State your business," one said, his voice a low rumble. Su Chun met his gaze, his own clear and calm. "I am here to apply for the position," he said. "The position of personal chef to the Marshal." The guard looked him up and down. The simple clothes, the travel-worn bag, the determined set of his jaw. After a long moment, he gave a single, sharp nod and jerked his head toward a small, heavily fortified side door. "Enter." The head butler, Lin, will see you. Don't wander. Su Chun crossed the threshold. The world of silk and betrayal was behind him. Before him lay stone, order, and the faint, promising scent of a kitchen hearth. He was ready. Chapter 2. The Broth That Awakened a God. The side door clanged shut behind Su Chun with a sound of finality. He found himself in a stark, flagstone courtyard. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of metal, oiled leather, and something cleanly austere. A man in immaculate, dark gray robes awaited him. He had sharp, assessing eyes and hair silvered at the temples, his posture so perfect it seemed engineered. Applicant, he stated, not a question. I am Lin, head of household. Follow me. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless addressed. Su Chun bowed slightly and followed. Lin led him through a series of utilitarian corridors, past closed doors and the occasional scurrying servant who moved with silent efficiency. They passed an open archway that led to a vast, empty drill yard, its earth packed hard by countless boots. Finally, they arrived at the kitchens. It was a cavernous space, all functional stone and heavy iron. Two other applicants were already there, looking nervous beside their stations piled with exotic ingredients. Glittering scalefish from the northern glaciers, fist-sized spirit truffles, baskets of jewel-like berries. Lin stopped in the center of the room. Marshal Kale has no use for frivolity. He requires nourishment that sustains the body for command and combat. Your task is to prepare one dish you believe fulfills that purpose. You have 2 hours. Begin. The other two sprang into action, knives flashing, fires roaring to life in the large central hearths. They were clearly trained chefs, their movements showy, designed to impress. Su Chun found a quiet, smaller hearth in a corner. He unpacked his simple pot, his knife, his ingredients. He had brought the leftover chicken, ginger, and scallions, along with the rice. He began, as before, with quiet, reverent preparation. He built a small, precise fire. His process was a meditation. Wash the rice. Simmer it gently. Clean the last of the chicken meat. Chop the ginger. Tie the scallions. He started a fresh broth, focusing his intent with even greater clarity than in the market. Here, in this fortress, the intent was different. It wasn't just peace. It was resilience, fortitude, restoration. He imagined mending cracks in stone, soothing frayed nerves, rebuilding strength from the foundation up. His chi, a warm, golden light visible only to his spiritual sense, wove itself into the simmering liquid. The other chefs produced spectacular dishes. One presented a towering, glazed meat sculpture surrounded by a moat of shimmering, dual-toned sauce. The other offered a delicate, translucent soup with floating, carved vegetable lotuses that pulsed faintly with blue energy. Su Chun's dish, when he placed it before Lin on a plain wooden tray, was almost laughable in its simplicity. A perfectly rounded bowl of pure white rice, and beside it, a deep cup of clear, golden broth. No garnish, no aroma that screamed for attention, just a clean, warm, comforting scent. Lin's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. Explain. The foundation of strength is a sound body, Su Chun said quietly. This broth will cleanse fatigue and repair minor imbalances. The rice will provide steady, lasting energy. Together, they are a foundation upon which any battle, of body or mind, can be waged. Lin's lips thinned. He was about to speak, likely to dismiss this peasant fare, when a new presence filled the doorway. It was like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Marshal Kale stood framed in the stone archway. He was taller than any man in the room, his shoulders broad enough to seem to block the light. He wore a simple black training tunic, damp with sweat, and his dark hair was cropped short. His face was all harsh planes and angles, bisected by a pale scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. But it was his eyes that were most arresting, a cold, wintry gray, devoid of warmth, scanning the room with the flat assessment of a predator. Everyone froze. Lin bowed deeply. Marshal, we did not mean to disturb you. Kale ignored him. His gaze swept over the two extravagant dishes with open disdain before landing on Su Chen's humble offering. A flicker of something, exhaustion, pain, passed behind his eyes. He'd come to the kitchen seeking something, not food. He hadn't truly tasted anything in 3 years. Not since the Battle of the Silent Peaks, where a venom scorpion sting had damaged his core and stolen his sense of taste. He came for the heat, the noise, to escape the silent, painful pressure in his own skull. What is this? His voice was a low gravel, the sound of rocks grinding together. The applicant's offering, Marshal, Lin said delicately. Without ceremony, Kale strode forward. He picked up the cup of broth. He didn't sniff it. He didn't seem to expect anything. He simply brought it to his lips and drank. For a moment, nothing. Then his entire body went rigid. A sensation, foreign and almost violently intense, exploded across his deadened palate. Taste, not just flavor, warmth, clarity, strength. It was like hearing a long-forgotten melody. The broth was savory, delicate, profound, but went deeper. As the liquid warmth slid down his throat, it didn't just hit his stomach. It flowed directly toward the jagged, aching fracture in his spiritual core, the source of his power and his constant pain. A gentle, golden warmth lapped at those raw edges, not healing them but soothing them, muting the sharp, grinding ache to a dull, manageable throb. For the first time in 1,000 days, the pain lessened. His hand, holding the empty cup, trembled slightly. He set it down with a sharp click on the stone counter. The oppressive silence of the room was absolute. The two fancy chefs held their breath. Lin watched, bewildered. Kale's wintry eyes lifted and pinned Su Chun where he stood. The gaze was no longer just assessing. It was probing, intense, almost hungry. Name! The single word was a command. Su Chun, sir. Your dish. Kale gestured to the other two spectacular, untouched plates. It is not a performance. It is sustenance. He turned his head, the movement slow and deliberate, to look at the other chefs. You, both of you, get out. They scrambled, grabbing their tools and fleeing without a word. Kale looked back at Su Chun. You are hired. Lin, see to his quarters. Adjutant, post a guard on the kitchen entrance. No one enters without my explicit permission. He issued the orders without taking his eyes off Su Chun. You will prepare my meals, starting with dinner. Then, the Marshal did something no one in the room had ever seen. He reached out, picked up the bowl of plain rice, and ate several slow, deliberate mouthfuls. Each one seemed to steady him further, the harsh lines of his face easing infinitesimally. He turned and walked out, the aura of stormy pressure receding with him. Lin was staring at Su Chun as if he'd just sprouted wings. He cleared his throat, his demeanor shifting from dismissive to deeply cautious. This way, Chef Su. He led Su Chun to a small, spotlessly clean room adjacent to the kitchen. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, a sturdy desk, and a window that looked out onto a small, walled herb garden. It was monastic. It was perfect. Your duties begin at dawn. The Marshal takes breakfast at 5th bell. The household roster and available ingredients are in the kitchen ledger. Do you require anything else? No, Su Chun said, placing his bag on the bed. This is everything I need. Alone, he sat on the edge of the thin mattress. The stone walls felt like an embrace. The quiet was not the silence of a prison cell, but the peace of a sanctuary. He had done it. He had stepped off the battlefield of his past life and into a fortress of his own choosing. And he had, somehow, reached a man everyone believed was untouchable. He had felt it. The moment the Marshal drank the broth, a shockwave of recognition, not just of taste, but of a fundamental, shared brokenness being offered a moment's respite. Su Chun looked at his hands, the hands that would now cook for the god of war. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time since his rebirth. He had not come here to fight, but perhaps, in this kitchen, he had found something worth protecting. Chapter 3. The kitchen becomes a sanctum. Dawn at the Marshal's manor was a silent, gray affair. Su Chun rose before the bells, his movements quiet and automatic. The kitchen was cold, the great hearths dark. He started a small fire in the hearth he'd claimed as his own, the crackle of kindling the only sound. His first task was to study the ledger Lynn had mentioned. It was a meticulous document, listing the manor's inhabitants, a surprisingly small number for such a large estate. The Marshal, his personal guard of 12, the household staff of 20, and a rotating garrison of 50 at the outer walls, their standard rations, and the incoming supplies. The ingredients were of high quality but practical: grains, hearty vegetables, river fish, poultry, lean cuts of beast meat. There were also a few locked spirit coolers holding rarer items, likely gifted by nobles and forgotten. Su Chun ignored the exotics. For the Marshal's breakfast, he selected oats, a jug of fresh milk from the manor's dairy, a few apples from the cellar, and a handful of nuts. He toasted the oats lightly to deepen their flavor, simmered them slowly in the milk with a pinch of salt, and finished them with finely diced apple and crushed nuts. As he stirred, he poured his intent into the pot: clarity, steadiness, sustained focus. He prepared simpler versions for the guard and staff, nourishing congee with preserved vegetables and eggs. Just as he was finishing, heavy, measured footsteps echoed in the corridor. Marshal Kale appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his severe black uniform, his hair damp. He didn't speak, just moved to the heavy wooden table in the center of the kitchen and sat, watching as Su Chun brought the bowl over. Kale ate methodically, his gaze distant. After several spoonfuls, he paused. "It's not sweet," he stated, as if accusing the oats of something. "The natural sweetness of the apple is sufficient, Marshal," Su Chun replied, wiping down his workstation. "Added sugar would cause a spike of energy, then a drop. This will provide a steady release." A grunt was his only answer, but he finished the entire bowl. As he stood to leave, he said, without looking at Su Chun, "Lunch at midday. I will be in the strategy room." He paused. Something substantial. The pattern was set. Su Chun cooked. Kale ate, offering only the barest of feedback, a nod, a grunt, a single word of instruction for the next meal. But he came, for every meal, and he always ate in the kitchen. By the third day, the kitchen staff, initially wary of this unknown young chef who had captivated their terrifying master, began to warm up. The elderly stockmaster, Lao, started leaving particularly good bones for Su Chen's broths. The head maid, a formidable woman named Huan, began arranging the kitchen garden's harvest on his counter with pride. Su Chen's spirit cooking worked its subtle magic on the household. The guard who'd pulled a muscle in the training yard found the ache fading faster after eating Su Chen's stew. The scullery maid with a persistent cough recovered after 2 days of his ginger-infused honey tea. The manor, always efficient, began to thrum with a quieter, more contented energy. And Kale began to linger. One afternoon, after a lunch of pan-seared river trout with roasted root vegetables, the Marshal didn't immediately leave. He remained at the table, a stack of military dispatches untouched before him. Su Chun was preparing a dough for the next day's noodles, his hands moving in a rhythmic, kneading motion. "The eastern border is restless," Kale said suddenly, his voice a low rumble in the quiet kitchen. He wasn't looking at Su Chun. He was staring at the dough being folded and pressed. "The Duke of Qing argues for a show of force. He thinks it will prevent war." Su Chun didn't stop kneading. He knew he was not being asked for political counsel. He was simply a sounding board. "A show of force can be a warning," he said quietly, "or a provocation. It depends on the hand that wields it." Kale's gaze shifted to him. "And if the hand is tired?" Su Chun met his eyes. "Then the foundation must be stronger, so the hand does not shake." Kale held his gaze for a long moment, then looked back at the dough. He stayed for another hour, reading his dispatches while Su Chun worked. It became a new ritual. Kale would bring his work to the kitchen. The cold, imposing god of war would sit at a flour-dusted table, surrounded by the smells of baking bread and simmering stock, and plan troop movements or review intelligence reports. He spoke little, but his presence was no longer that of an inspector. It was simply there. One evening, after a particularly trying day dealing with the capital's bureaucrats, Kale arrived for dinner looking like a gathering thundercloud. The guards outside the kitchen door visibly tensed as he passed. Su-chan served him a simple clay pot dish, braised beef with daikon, the steam carrying an aroma of star anise and warmth. Kale ate the first few bites in furious silence. Then, slowly, the tension in his shoulders began to unwind. The storm in his eyes receded. "They sit in their marble halls," he muttered, more to himself than to Su-chan, "and debate the cost of arrows while my men sleep in the mud." He took another bite, chewing slowly. They have no concept of the foundation. Su-chan, polishing a pot nearby, said nothing. His quiet acceptance was permission enough. "I lost half my cohort at the Silent Peaks," Kale said, his voice now flat, drained of anger. "Good men. Not to the enemy's blade, but to the poison in the mist. I led them in. I led what was left out." He looked down at the clay pot. "This does not taste of ash." It was the closest he had come to acknowledging the healing in the food. It wasn't just the return of taste. It was the quieting of a different kind of poison, the kind of guilt that festered in the soul. "A good broth," Su-chan said softly, "is built on bones that have endured fire. Its strength is in its clarity, not in hiding the past." Kale finished the meal in silence. When he stood to leave, he placed a hand briefly, heavily, on Su-chan's shoulder as he passed. A wordless gesture of thanks, of shared understanding. The touch was warm and solid, and it sent an unexpected current of reassurance through Su-chan. The true test of the new dynamic came from outside. A formal letter arrived for Su-chan, delivered by a sneering servant in Su family livery who was made to wait at the outer gate. The seal was his father's. Su-chan broke the wax in the kitchen garden. The letter was a masterclass in condescension. It spoke of his youthful folly, the shame he had brought upon the family name, and the generous offer to allow him to return, not as heir, of course, but to manage a minor provincial restaurant under the supervision of Su-yong. It was an offer designed to humiliate, to put him back in his proper, subordinate place. Kale, who had been observing from the kitchen doorway, held out his hand. Su-chan passed him the letter. Kale's eyes scanned the flowing script, his expression granite. Without a word, he walked to the kitchen hearth, where a low fire burned for stock. He held the corner of the parchment to the flame. They both watched as the family seal blackened, curled, and ignited, the paper consuming itself in a quick, orange blaze. "The foundation here is stone," Kale said, dropping the last fragment into the fire. "It does not burn." He looked at Su-chan. "Do you understand?" Su-chan felt a final, invisible chain snap. "Yes, Marshal." That night, as he prepared a calming tea before bed, Su-chan realized the profound shift. The kitchen was no longer just a workplace. It had become the quiet, warm, beating heart of the manor. And he, the reborn son who had renounced everything, was its keeper. The Marshal, the feared and solitary legend, had found a sanctuary here too, not in the grandeur of his title, but in the simplicity of a shared meal and the silent solidarity of a place where he did not have to be a god. He was just a man eating food that finally tasted like something again. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 4. The Growl of Protection. The rhythm of the kitchen was broken by the arrival of the silver and crimson liveried servants of House Valerius. A formal delegation was visiting to discuss border logistics, and Marshal Kale, as a matter of grim political necessity, was obliged to host a luncheon. Head butler Lin was in a state of barely contained anxiety. Chef Su, the Valerius envoy, is known for his discerning tastes. His personal chef, Master Boren, is something of a celebrity among the nobility. This is a significant occasion. Su-chan listened placidly as Lin listed expected delicacies: smoked peacock tongues, jellied essence of glacier worm, cloud puff pastries. The Marshal requested the meal be substantial and efficient. Su-chan reminded him, "I will prepare a menu suitable for a working discussion." Lin looked pained, but didn't argue. The Marshal's inexplicable favor towards this simple chef was the only law in this kitchen. On the day, Su-chan prepared a menu that was a testament to refined practicality. A clear, double-boiled soup with tender chicken and wolfberries, fortifying. Steamed buns filled with minced pork and fragrant herbs, portable, satisfying. Stir-fried greens with garlic, cleansing. And for the main, a whole, slow-roasted lamb shoulder, rubbed with rosemary and mountain thyme, so tender it fell from the bone, served with crispy roasted potatoes. It was food for soldiers and statesmen, not for dandies. The delegation filed into the austere dining hall. At its head was Envoy Valerius, a man whose finery seemed to weigh him down. Beside him, wearing a smock embroidered with golden whisks and a perpetual sneer, was Master Boren. The meal proceeded. Kale, at the head of the table, ate with his usual focused silence. The military aides dug in with appreciation. Envoy Valerius picked at his food, looking vaguely disappointed by the lack of theatrical presentation. It was during the lamb course that Boren leaned over and said, loudly enough for the head of the table to hear, "A rustic effort. Envoy. Simple peasant fare, really." One wonders if the Marshal's famed discipline extends to a certain austerity of palate. He chuckled, a brittle sound. Perhaps the rumors are true, and the kitchen has been entrusted to provincial hands. A chill fell over the table. The military aides stopped eating. Lin, serving wine, turned pale. Su Chun, who had entered to check on the service, stood quietly by the side door. He felt no anger, only a distant pity for a man who defined his worth by the complexity of his sauces. Marshal Kale set down his knife and fork. The clink was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He did not look at Boren. He didn't raise his voice. But when he spoke, the temperature seemed to plummet. Master, chef. The title was a venomous dart. You are a guest at my table. You insult the food that nourishes me and my men. You insult the hands that prepared it. He finally turned his head. His wintry eyes, now the color of a killing frost, locked onto Boren. The famed chef shrank back, as if physically struck. I have faced armies that trembled at my approach, Kale continued, his voice a soft, deadly rasp. I have broken siege lines and shattered battle formations. The hands you dismiss have done more to repair this house, to repair me, than 1,000 of your glittering banquets. He leaned forward slightly. Insult my chef again, he said, each word dropping like a shard of ice, and I will have your tongue removed and served to my hounds. Do you think I jest? The threat was not a boast. It was a simple, terrifying statement of fact. The air hummed with unleashed, predatory energy. Boren looked as if he might faint. Envoy Valerius was sweating profusely. And Marshal, I beg your pardon, a poor joke most, Boren stammered. Get out, Kale said, cutting him off. He didn't shout. The quiet command was worse. Take your discerning palate and your golden whisks and get out of my house. The discussions are concluded. Lin, see them to the gate. The Valerius delegation was ushered out in a humiliated, scrambling rush. The story, of course, spread through the noble circles of Ethel before sunset. The message was unequivocal. The mysterious chef in the Marshal's manor was under the personal, ferocious protection of the god of war. He was untouchable. That evening, the kitchen was preternaturally quiet. The staff moved with a new kind of reverence around Su Chun, tinged with a little awe. Kale came for his dinner as usual, as if the afternoon's events had been of no more consequence than swatting a fly. Su Chun served him a light meal, noodles in a simple broth with vegetables. As he placed the bowl down, he said quietly, "You did not need to do that, Marshal." His words were empty. Kale picked up his chopsticks. A foundation of stone does not tolerate termites. He took a sip of broth, and for the briefest second, his stern features softened. This is good. It tastes calm. It is meant to, Su Chun said. They lapsed into their usual comfortable silence. But the atmosphere had shifted. A line had been drawn in the sand, not by Su Chun seeking protection, but by Kale offering it, violently and absolutely. The kitchen was not just a sanctuary. It was a fortress within a fortress, and Su Chun was its most prized asset. Later, as Su Chun banked the hearth for the night, Adjutant Fong, Kale's most trusted officer, appeared. He was a serious, scarred man who rarely spoke to the household staff. "Chef Su," he said with a respectful nod. The Marshal has ordered an additional guard rotation on the kitchen and your quarters. Discreetly, he also asked me to give you this. He held out a small, plain box. Inside, on a bed of dark velvet, lay a knife. It was a chef's knife, but its lines were clean, its handle wrapped in dark leather, and the steel was of the same rare, faintly blue-tinged alloy used for officer sidearms. It was a tool, but also a weapon, a symbol of trust and a means of defense. He said a craftsman should have proper tools, Adjutant Fong said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. But between you and me, sir, I think he just wanted you to have something sharp nearby. Su Chen took the knife. It was perfectly balanced. Thank him for me. Alone again, he tested the edge. It gleamed in the firelight. The message was clear. Kale's growl of protection had echoed through the city. But here, in the quiet of the hearth, he had also given a gift. It said, I will guard the fortress. You guard the hearth. Su Chen placed the knife on his workstation, ready for the morning. For the first time since his rebirth, he felt not just peace, but a sense of belonging so deep it rooted him to the stone beneath his feet. He was no longer Su Chen, the disgraced heir. He was Su Chen, the martial chef. And that was an identity he would wear with pride. Chapter 5. Storms from the Past. The Imperial Autumn Banquet was a mandatory piece of political theater, and this year, Marshal Kale was ordered to host a prelude event at his manor. The guest list was a who's who of Ethel's power players, including, to Su Chen's grim lack of surprise, the Su family. Su Liang arrived with their father, the old Su patriarch looking pinched and stern, while Su Liang shone with a slick, triumphant arrogance. He had been named heir apparent. He wore the family's phoenix crest like a conqueror's medal. The banquet was a logistical nightmare Lin reveled in, but Kale had given one immutable order. Su Chen was to prepare the menu, and he was not to be presented as a servant. He would oversee, not serve. From a concealed gallery above the hall, Su Chen watched the spectacle. He saw Su Liang holding court, laughing too loudly, casting subtle, disdainful glances around the Marshal's austere halls. The storm from his past life was gathering in the room below. It found him during a lull, when he descended to the kitchens to check on the final courses. Su Liang accidentally found him in a corridor lined with storage racks. Well, Su Liang said, his voice a silken sneer. The prodigal son, or should I say, the runaway cook. He looked Su Chen up and down, taking in his simple but clean chef's attire. Hiding in the scullery, are we? I heard you'd found patronage here. How quaint. Su Chen said nothing, simply waiting for him to finish. Father is still furious, you know, Su Liang continued, stepping closer. Your little stunt caused quite a scandal. But look at you now, a common servant in a soldier's house. Meanwhile, I have everything you threw away. The title, the businesses, the respect. His smile was venomous. Does it rankle, brother? To know you're nothing? I am a martial chef, Su Chen said, his voice calm. It is a title earned, not inherited. It is enough. Su Liang's eyes flashed with anger at the lack of reaction. He needed to draw blood. At that moment, a group of nobles, including Envoy Valerius, still smarting from his last visit, wandered into the corridor, drawn by the raised voices. Seeing his audience, Su Liang raised his voice. Enough? To be a glorified slave? Tell me, does the Marshal know he employs a traitor's son? That you were accused of betraying your own blood? What secrets are you whispering into his ear along with your simple fare? The accusation hung in the air, toxic and public. It was a direct attack on Su Chen's character and, by extension, a challenge to Kale's judgment. Before Su Chen could formulate a response, a figure detached from the shadows at the end of the corridor. Marshal Kale. He had heard everything. His face was a mask of cold fury, but he paused, his eyes on Su Chen, ceding him the floor. Su Chen understood. Kale would crush this insect, but Su Chen had the right to face his past first. He turned to Su Liang and the gathered nobles. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and carried the weight of 2 lifetimes. You speak of betrayal, brother, Su Chen said, the familial terms sounding like an indictment. Let me tell you a story. A hypothetical one, of course. He paused, letting the silence build. What if there was a first son dedicated to his family's art? What if his younger brother, consumed by jealousy, conspired with others to forge documents, to funnel funds, to build a cage of lies so convincing it condemned the first son to a slow death in the dark? Su Liang's face began to drain of color. The nobles leaned in, sensing real scandal. Su Chen's gaze was unwavering. What if the evidence was planted in a locked desk, the key found in the first son's quarters? What if the bank ledgers were altered by a clerk whose daughter suddenly received a hefty dowry? What if the poison that finally came was delivered by a guard who was promised a captain's commission? He took a step forward. Su Liang took an involuntary step back. What if the brother stood before the magistrate and wept false tears, swearing he only wanted his brother to see reason? The details were horrifically, unervingly specific. The hypothetical was far too real. Envoy Valerius was staring at Su Liang with dawning horror. That, Su Chan said softly, would be a betrayal of blood. A crime not just against a brother, but against heaven itself. I wonder, hypothetically, what fate such a brother would deserve. Su Liang was trembling, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You're mad, spinning wild tales. Are they? Su Chen asked. Or are they simply the truth, viewed from a different perspective? It was then that Kale moved. He didn't stride. He seemed to simply materialize between Su Chen and the crowd, his presence an impenetrable wall. The story is fascinating, Kale said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. But this is my house. You, he said, his eyes boring into Su Liang, have insulted my honored chef and disrupted my gathering. You are leaving. Now. The Su patriarch finally found his voice, spluttering. Marshal, this is outrageous, my son merely. Your son, Kale interrupted, is lucky I do not arrest him for slandering a member of my household. The investigation into certain past financial discrepancies can be reopened so easily. Get out, all of you Su. It was a public annihilation. The Su family was escorted from the manor with less ceremony than the Valerius delegation. The story that spread this time was different. The Su family was not just ambitious, but potentially treacherous, and the Marshal's mysterious chef was a wrong man under the wing of the most powerful force in the realm. The banquet ended early. The kitchen was a mess of half-finished courses. Su Chan mechanically began to direct the cleanup, his hands steady, but his spirit shaken. He had faced the ghost of his past and flayed it open with words. There was no triumph in it, only a hollow exhaustion. Long after the last pot was scrubbed, Su Chan stood in the dark, silent kitchen. The echo of his own accusations haunted him. He didn't hear Kale enter. He only felt a solid presence beside him at the sink. Without a word, Kale picked up a drying cloth and began to wipe the clean bowl Su Chan was holding, his movements surprisingly deft. No apologies were offered. No platitudes were spoken. The god of war, in full dress uniform, simply stood beside his chef and helped him finish the work. It was the most profound solidarity Su Chan had ever known. The storm had passed. The foundation of stone had held. And in the quiet aftermath, he was not alone. Chapter 6. The core of the matter. The peace that followed the banquet scandal was deep but fragile. Marshal Kale's energy core, under the steady, gentle nourishment of Su Chen's spirit cooking, had stabilized. The constant pain was a distant memory, and slivers of his former preternatural strength had begun to return. He looked less like a man enduring a slow collapse, and more like a dormant volcano gradually reawakening. This progress did not go unnoticed by his enemies. The dinner was a private affair, just Kale and his senior adjutants. Su Chan had prepared a hearty venison stew, its rich aroma filling the kitchen. As per protocol, a taster, a junior guard with a minor resistance gift, sampled the dish first. He nodded, showing no ill effects. Kale took his first bite and froze, not with pleasure, but with a sudden, violent tension. His knuckles whitened around his spoon. A faint, sickly green pallor crept under his skin. Poison. He gritted out, the word slurred. Core targeted. Pandemonium erupted. Adjutant Fong shouted orders. Guards sealed the manor. The junior taster, bewildered and panicked, was restrained. The poison had been dormant, keyed specifically to react with a deeply damaged core, which the taster did not have. Kale was carried to his chambers, his body racked with violent tremors, a corrosive, dark energy visibly warping the air around his chest where his core resided. The manor's physician and two hastily summoned water attribute healers could only shake their heads. The poison is spiritual, not physical. It's feeding on the old damage, accelerating the fracture. We can slow it, but we cannot stop it. Without a counteragent, the core will shatter in hours. Su Chan stood in the doorway, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He saw the greenish-black tendrils of venom crawling over Kale's sternum. He smelled it, not with his nose, but with his spirit sense, a cloying, acidic scent that fought against the lingering aroma of his stew. This was alchemy of the highest, most malicious order, and it was familiar. In his past life, he'd heard whispers of such a thing, soul severance pollen, derived from flower that bloomed only in the death chi of a place called the Ghost Fawn Canyon. It needs the heart bloom lily, Su Chan said aloud, his voice cutting through the healer's frantic murmurs. Everyone turned to stare at him. The antidote is symbiotic, he continued, his mind racing through old culinary pharmacopoeia he'd studied. The poison is from the canyon's death chi. The cure grows in the one spot of pure life energy within it, the heart bloom lily. Its essence can purify the core and bind the fractures. Adjutant Feng's face was grim. Ghost Fawn Canyon is a day's hard ride. It's infested with spirit beasts twisted by the death chi. Sending a squad in blind is a suicide mission. Then I will go, Su Chan said. A chorus of protests erupted. You're a chef. It's too dangerous. I am a spirit cook, Su Chan stated, a new, unshakable authority in his voice. I can sense the energies. I can find the lily where soldiers might not. And I am the one who fed him. This is my duty. He saw the conflict in Feng's eyes, the loyalty to his Marshal warring with the logic of the plan. Finally, Feng gave a sharp nod. A small team. Fast horses. We leave in 10 minutes. The journey was a blur of galloping hooves and fear-fueled adrenaline. Ghost Fawn Canyon lived up to its name, a jagged wound in the earth, spewing a miasma of gray, lethargic mist that sapped warmth and hope. Twisted, pallid trees clawed at a bruise-colored sky. The sounds were wrong, distorted echoes, faint, hungry chitters. Their progress was immediately challenged. A pack of scourge wolves, their fur matted with spiritual residue, eyes glowing with malignant intelligence, blocked the path. The guards drew their swords, but Su Chan stepped forward. He didn't have a weapon. He had a pouch of meal rations, simple oat cakes he'd infused before leaving with intent of peace and satiation. He broke one and scattered the pieces, pushing his chi into the offering. It wasn't an attack. It was an appeal to a deeper nature. The lead wolf sniffed, its growl dying. The malignant light in its eyes dimmed, replaced by a confused, mundane hunger. It ate the crumbs. With a dismissive huff, it turned and led its pack away into the mist. The guard stared dumbfounded. Su Chan pressed on, following a thread of pure, vibrant life energy he could feel like a distant, golden chord in the canyon dissonant symphony. They faced other horrors, a quicksand pit that whispered with lost souls. Su Chan calmed it with a sprinkle of salt, a symbol of purity, and a grove of weeping willows whose tears induced madness. He warded them off with the smoke from a bundle of cleansing sage. He was not a warrior. He was a chef, a nurturer, using his art not to destroy, but to pacify, to negotiate, to heal the edges of a wounded world. His escorts watched in growing awe, their initial protectiveness shifting to something like reverence. Deep in the heart of the canyon, in a small, sun-drenched clearing that defied the gloom, they found it. The heartbloom lily. It glowed with a soft, inner light, its petals the color of dawn, its heart a pulsating gold. It was guarded by a massive, serpentine, stone-scale drake, the guardian of a life spot. The drake reared, its maw dripping stone-melting venom. The guards raised their weapons, but Su Chun again stepped forward. He had one thing left. The thermos of broth he had brought for Kale, now cold. He poured it into a bowl and placed it on the ground, infusing it with every ounce of his intent, gratitude, guardianship, the strength of a promise kept. The drake lowered its head, sniffing. It was a creature of earth and life, not death. It sensed no malice, only a profound, respectful purpose. With a deep, rumbling sound that shook the ground, it nudged the bowl, then curled itself around the lily, granting permission with a slow blink of its great jewel-like eye. Su Chun harvested a single blossom with a careful, ceramic knife, leaving the roots intact. He bowed deeply to the drake. The return journey was a frantic race against time. They found Kale in his chambers, pale as marble, the dark veins of poison now spiderwebbing across his chest, his breath shallow. The healers were maintaining a fragile stasis, their faces etched with despair. Without a word, Su Chun went to the kitchen. He cleansed the lily, using only the petals. He made a clear, simple tea, channeling all his power, all his fear, all his burgeoning loyalty into it. The infusion turned a luminous, sun-kissed gold. He carried it to Kale's bedside, supporting the Marshal's head, and gently tipped the liquid between his parted lips. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, a golden light emanated from Kale's core, pushing back against the black-green tendrils. There was a sound like shattering crystal, followed by a deep, resonant hum. The poisonous veins receded, dissolved, vanished. The pallor receded, replaced by healthy color. The terrible, ragged fracture in his spiritual center didn't just heal. It fused stronger than before, the old scar tissue replaced by resilient, glowing latticework. Kale's eyes flew open. They were clear, focused, and burning with their old, formidable intensity, but now underpinned by a profound, awestruck warmth. His first sight was Su Chen's exhausted, dirt-streaked face, etched with worry. He didn't speak. He reached up, his hand, now steady and strong, closing over Su Chen's where it still held the empty cup. The grip was firm, an anchor, a promise. The healer, checking Kale's pulse, gasped. "Marshal, your core, it's not just stable. It's enhanced. The resonance is purer than before the injury." Kale's gaze never left Su Chen's. He finally spoke, his voice rough but clear. "The most potent weapon in the realm," he murmured, "is not a sword, but a ladle in the right hands." He squeezed Su Chen's hand. "You went into the dark for me. You are my hearth," Su Chen replied simply, the truth laid bare. "I protect what is mine." In that moment, the last barrier between Marshal and Chef, protector and protected, dissolved. They were simply Kale and Su Chun, two broken men made whole in each other's orbit, bound by something far stronger than duty or patronage. They were bound by a choice, made again and again, to stand by the foundation they had built together. Chapter 7. A home, not a battlefield. The aftermath of the poisoning was swift and brutal. The investigation, led by a furious adjutant phone with the full might of the Marshal's intelligence network, took only days. The trail led back to a rival military faction led by Duke Qing, who feared Kale's returning strength. The delivery method was a corrupt quartermaster and a bewitched spice jar. The Su family, while not directly involved in the plot, was found to have accepted substantial loans from the Duke in exchange for turning a blind eye and keeping Su Chen's past scandal alive as a potential distraction. Their merchant empire crumbled under the weight of official scrutiny and withdrawn credit. Su Chen felt no satisfaction, only a quiet closure. The storms of his past life had finally spent their fury against the unyielding stone of his present. Weeks melted into months. The seasons turned. The kitchen of the Marshal's manor remained the constant, warm center of the world. One crisp autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the high windows, painting the stone floors in long, golden rectangles. Su Chen was at his central workstation, kneading dough for the day's noodles. The rhythmic thump push-fold was a soothing melody. The great hearth crackled comfortably. The smells of yeast, simmering bone broth, and drying herbs mingled into a singular scent. Home. Marshal Kale was already there, seated at his usual spot at the worn wooden table. He wore a simple dark tunic, not his uniform. A steaming cup of tea, Su Chen's blend, fragrant with chrysanthemum and goji berry, sat beside a stack of military dispatches. He was reading one, a slight frown on his face, but the harsh lines of perpetual pain were gone. His presence was no longer a contained thunderstorm, but a grounded, formidable mountain. Head Butler Lin appeared in the doorway, his robes impeccable, a faint sheen of anxiety on his brow. "Marshal," he said, bowing, "the envoy from the Southern Coalition has arrived early. He awaits you in the receiving hall. He is impatient." Kale didn't look up from his dispatch. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his tea, his eyes flicking to Su Chen's back, watching the steady, practiced motion of his hands in the dough. "Marshal," Lin prompted gently after a moment of silence. Kale set his cup down with a soft click. He placed the dispatch on the table, smoothed it with a palm. Then he stood. Lin stepped back, expecting him to head for the door. Instead, Kale walked to the hearth. He stopped beside Su Chen, not speaking, just standing there, a solid, warm presence. He watched the dough being transformed, the gluten developing under Su Chen's sure hands. "Marshal," Lin ventured again, confused. "The envoy." Kale finally spoke, his voice a low, calm rumble that filled the sun-drenched kitchen. "Let him wait." Lin blinked. "Sir?" "The trade agreement." Kale turned his head, and his gaze, when it landed on Lin, was not unkind, but utterly immovable. "The most important strategic asset of this realm," he said, his words slow and clear, "is right here." He nodded towards Su Chen, who had paused his kneading, looking up, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. Kale continued, his voice softening just a degree, "Meant for the ears in this room alone, and he is not to be disturbed." He turned fully back to Su Chen, the matter closed. The world and its impatient envoys, its treaties and its politics, ceased to exist beyond the stone walls of the kitchen. Lin stood for a second longer, then a slow understanding dawned on his face. He bowed, deeper this time, a smile of his own breaking through his professional mask. "Of course, Marshal." He retreated, his footsteps silent on the stone. Su Chen resumed his kneading. Kale did not return to his reports. He leaned back against the workstation, crossing his arms, content to simply be. The sunlight caught the dust motes dancing in the air between them, turning them to gold. Here, there were no titles of heir or marshal, no plots or poisons, no betrayals or battles. There was only the quiet symphony of a kitchen at work, the sigh of the fire, the scrape of dough on wood, the bubbling of the perpetual broth pot. Su Chen divided the dough, began rolling it out into long, even strands. He had found it, not by seeking power or vengeance, but by walking away from it. He had found a purpose in nourishment, a family in loyalty, and a home not in a mansion of silk, but in a fortress of stone, warmed from within by a hearth he tended himself. Kale watched him, the man who had given him back taste, solace, strength, and a reason to lay down the burden of being a god. He had found not a servant, but a partner in peace, the guardian of his fortress and the keeper of his heart. Outside, the world spun on with its wars and whispers. But inside the walls of the manor, in the warm, fragrant heart of the kitchen, there was only this, the simple, profound sound of a man making noodles and another man, finally at rest, choosing to stay. Home.